All right, here we are in the last section of Unit 1 and our first example. And it says Ramiro got his first job in 2006. In that year, Social Security tax was 6.2% of the income up to a maximum of $94,200. We'll come back to that in a second. Medicare tax was 1.45%. If Ramiro earned $73,210 in 2006, how much did he pay for Social Security and Medicare taxes? Well, the first thing that we know is that in regards to Social Security, there is a maximum. Meaning if he goes over that maximum, he's only going to pay Social Security up to when he earned $94,200. Now in this case, Ramiro did not go over the maximum, so the maximum doesn't really apply here. But we do know that 6.2% written as a decimal is 0.062, and we're going to multiply that by Ramiro's income for the year, which is the $73,210. And when we do that, we get $4,539.02. So we've got Social Security done, now we've got to do Medicare. Well, Medicare, again, is 1.45%, so if I move the decimal over twice, I get 0.0145 times the same income that we did with the Social Security. When we multiply that, I get $1,061.55. Now to find the total that he paid, we're going to add these two values together, and we get $5,600.57. And that was the total that Ramiro paid for Social Security and Medicare tax. For the YouTube, please press pause and solve this. Once you are done, press play and we'll continue. All right, it says Lisa made a total of X dollars last year, which was less than the maximum taxable income. So we know we're going to be looking at her whole income, which in this case is X. We know that Social Security was 6.2%, Medicare was 1.4%. It says write an expression. So remember, expression is not going to have an equal sign. It's just going to have our algebraic data of what Lisa paid for Social Security and Medicare combined. Well, I know that I took 0.062 and multiplied it by what Ramiro earned, so let's do the same with Lisa. 0.062 times, we don't know the exact dollar amount, but we know she earned X dollars. The next thing we'll do is the same thing with the Medicare. And if you'll remember, after we did that, we went ahead and we added those values together. And if we do that here, we get a total of 0.0765 times X, and there's our algebraic expression. Example 2, it says express the Social Security tax for 2006 as a piecewise function. So the function of X here, remember our piecewise function simply breaks out each specific scenario. Well, we know that you would take the 6.2% times whatever was earned, and that's when someone earned greater than 0, so they had to have a job. Somewhere in there, it falls between that and the $94,200, which was the table maximum for that year. After that, it's $5,840.40 when someone is earning greater than the $94,200. Now some of you there might be saying, okay, where did she come up with $5,840.40? Seems like I just kind of pulled that out of the air, but that's not exactly true. If I take the 0.062 and I multiply it by that table maximum, which was the $94,200, if all of you have your calculators out, you can multiply that through, and you'll find that you get $5,840.40. Now, because that's the maximum you're going to pay, it does not matter how much you go over this $94,200, you're still only going to be paying on that amount. So anybody who earns greater than the $94,200 is going to be paying the $58,40.40. All right, for this example, please press pause, complete it. When you're done, press play, and we'll continue. All right, it says Ming worked 3 jobs in 2006. The total of her incomes was less than $94,200, so we know she did not go over the maximum. At Quick Mart, she made X dollars. At the college bookstore, she made Y dollars. And at the Mail Depot, she earned Z dollars. Express the combined total of her Social Security and Medicare tax algebraically. Well, we know that Social Security was the .062, and we know that the other value was .0145. Total, that would be 0.0765. She earned X plus Y plus Z, all of that multiplied by the .0765. And there we go. All right, for example 3, it says to graph the Social Security tax piecewise function from example 2. So I've gone ahead and placed a graph on here already, and let's see what we know. Well, we know that when the person earns $94,020, $94,200, which is going to be about right here, that they pay an amount of $58,40.40, which is going to be about right here. So if I place that point, that is what's known as my cusp. It's the place at which the graph is going to change. But I know up until that point, someone is going to be paying a consistent amount, going up at the same amount, all the way up until that point. But then at that point, it levels out. And so that's what this graph is going to look like, with the cusp, or this point right here, being at $58,40.40 and $94,200 is that particular point. For the you-do, please go ahead and take a second to complete this. Press pause. When you come back, we'll go ahead and finish it out. All right, let's take a look at it. And it says here that Mark's Social Security was $3,500. So going back to the graph, $3,500 falls about right there. And it's saying use this graph to approximate how much he earned. Well, at that $3,500, if we just come out here on the graph, where it hits it is about right there. And I'm a little bit off on that. I'll tell you that it's going to be around $55,000 is what he earns. It's somewhere here between $50,000 to $55,000 is what he earned. All right, last example for this unit. It says in 1988, Social Security tax was 7.51% to the maximum income of $45,000. If Grace earned $51,211 in 1988, how much Social Security tax did she pay? Well, in this case, notice that Grace, and sorry, that should have been capitalized, Grace did go over the table maximum. And so here's a perfect example of someone who went over and what we need to do. If that person went over the table maximum is what we use. So it's 45,000 times the .0751, which is what the Social Security was for that year. And so the maximum that Grace or anybody is going to pay in insurance or in Social Security for that year is $3,379.50. Please complete this you do. Press pause. When you're ready, press play, and we'll get started. All right, it says if Ramona in 1988 paid $2853.80 in Social Security tax, what was her taxable income? Well, I know that before I had to multiply the percentage for Social Security times the income. Well, in this case, I don't know what the income is, and when I don't know what an income is or I don't know what a value is, I simply give it a value of X. And I know when I multiply that together, I get the total paid, and that is what we have here, is the $2853.80. Again, now we've got a very simple algebraic problem. Divide both sides by 0.0751. And when I do that, I end up, go ahead and get your calculators out, should have gotten $38,000 is what Ramona earned in 1988.